Listening to the American Adversaries Drive Time Prime Time show. Nicholas Cicero is on the bridge, so we are in good hands as we come to you through the ether or across the wires, as it were. Abe, real quick before we go on, how is the weather over there tonight?
There's a little bit of rain sprinkling on and off, but on the whole, it's been very pleasant. I just wanted to say, I thought that I was thinking about it a little bit short with Al. And I was thinking about his question a little bit. Let me just clarify, the Temple Mount is the site of both the first and second Jewish temples. The second of which was destroyed 1900 years ago. It is the belief, it's the Jewish belief that somewhere down the road, when after the coming of the Messiah, not that I know a whole lot about what's going to happen then, but the belief is that at that point there will be a third temple constructed. But practically today, there are no such plans or anything like that. It's still considered the holiest spot of Judaism, and that's why several Jews and Christians would like the right to be able to pray there. But currently that's not allowed. And none of that would interfere with the mosque. None of that would interfere with the placement of the Al-Aqsa mosque.
Right, and of course that it sounded kind of like, I don't want to speak for Al, but it sounded kind of like he'd seen something or read something somewhere that indicated that this was already happening. And so that would seem to be the premise behind this question. I'm only guessing, though. But it just goes to highlight all the confusion that obviously is being played up by Hamas and Hezbollah and the other forces of evil over there.
Yeah, I think that's right. And I think that people are because people don't know a lot of the details, it makes it easier for the likes of Mahmoud Abbas or Fatah to really sow confusion and to make claims that Israel is desecrating the mosque or whatever it might be, whatever the claim might be, from one day to the next.
Right.
But anyway, I did just want to clarify that. I thought we'd give an hour with on that.
Okay, all right. Well, I appreciate that, and I'm sure he does too. He's a regular listener. We appreciate his phone calls. Let me ask this, Dave. The President of the United States, his reaction to this, or at least the White House reaction, seems to be that on the one hand, they seem to kind of understand what Israel's doing, but on the other hand, they seem to be putting pressure on Israel to be the one to somehow end this. Am I getting all this right? Talk about confusing.
Yeah, well, initially the White House reaction was to call on everyone to tamp down violence on both sides. And people in Israel are, they've been having a very rough time. It's one side that's committing violence. It's one side that is attacking and stabbing and killing Jews. And you expect your closest ally and perhaps, what you'd hope is still the one force for truth and justice in the world to be able to get it right. And instead the president makes it sound as if this is something that's going on in both directions. It doesn't help. The help matters when the State Department starts talking. John Kerry initially blamed the violence on settlements. It has nothing to do with settlements. They don't claim it has to do with settlements. The people aren't even, the attackers aren't coming from the areas where there are settlements. One thing has nothing to do with another. And then to make matters even worse is the State Department spokesman, John Kirby, also alluded to terrorism on both sides, and that Israel was using excessive force because they were shooting in order to stop some of the stabbings, the attackers were being shot. So that's the excessive force. And Israel is for some time, Israelis have not been pleased with this administration. And this is
indeed it is. And I wish I could do something about it other than, reveal it, but for what it's worth, we apologize on behalf of the United States. But you say more people are taking like concealed weapons permits. Are gun sales up over there?
They are. Israel has some moderate level of gun control. A lot of people have guns, but many regular citizens, unless they can show some need for one, aren't entitled to a license, and they're now loosening up those standards.
Well, that's a good thing. That's sort of a side note. I forget where I saw the source this morning. It may have been television, may have been radio. I was kind of doing a lot of running around this morning, but there was a survey evidently that was taken of Arabs in East Jerusalem, and it was overwhelming that should there be a Palestinian state, they would prefer to remain with an Israeli government than be a part of an Arab state. Have you heard of that survey?
Yeah, these polls get taken every so often, and the results don't seem to change much. I think that the residents of Jerusalem, the Arabs of Jerusalem, are permanent residents of Israel. That's their status. They're eligible for citizenship. Very few of them actually choose to become citizens, but they have full rights. So you get used to things like relatively responsible police and a free press and all sorts of other things that come with liberal democracy. And they see right across basically across the road, they see what life is like under a repressive, corrupt Palestinian authority, and they want no part of it.
Boy, I wish somebody would do a great documentary on that, and because it's a great testament as to the nature of the Jewish people in Israel as a state compared to the other.
Yeah. In fact, there are, besides the Jerusalem residents, there are well over 1 million Arabs who are citizens of Israel. Most of them reside in northern Israel. And they're full citizens, they vote. There are 11% of the Knesset is Arab representatives.
At least there are some smart ones after all, right? And I don't mean to make fun, but obviously they can understand the difference between a civilized government and a chaotic, anarchic type government that inspires and instigates and rewards terrorism. And Abbas, he's still right in the middle of this, providing provocations of his own, is he not?
Yes, he is. I think that for these people, given a choice, should Israel exist or should Israel not exist, most of them would probably prefer that Israel not exist. But given the choice of living under Israeli jurisdiction or Palestinian Authority jurisdiction, they'll take Israel.
Any day of the week, I'm sure of that. Hey, let me change it up just a little bit. The Russians are developing, it seems, a coalition of their own in Syria, and there are reports that there are elements of the Iranian forces and Cuban forces on the ground now in Syria. Is that the reports that you're seeing in Israel?
Yeah, that's, you have to do a double take when you look at the paper to make sure it's not from the 1980s. The Russians, Cubans fighting alongside the Russians. Haven't seen that for some time. I'm sorry?
I was just going to say, and finish the point you were going to make, but also does that make people in Israel nervous?
People are somewhat nervous about exactly what this Russian presence in Syria is going to do. The Russians, at least in Israeli eyes, have, in essence, no morality to their foreign policy. They're doing strictly what is good for Russia, and if it's dangerous for Israel, too bad. There are actually reports that because of Russian aircraft in the skies of Syria, that Israeli aircraft, in order to avoid a confrontation, would have to turn back with reconnaissance strikes. And that is disturbing, because one of the ways that Israel keeps itself safe is by having command, if they want it, over the skies of Syria and Lebanon. That's one way that they keep Hezbollah under a little bit of control, and that they know that they know what Hezbollah is doing, and they know when they're getting the weapons. So anything that interferes with that is going to be potentially very dangerous for Israel.
Yeah, absolutely, because it makes it less of a science and more guesswork in terms of the foreign intelligence there. John Kerry and Prime Minister Netanyahu are to meet this week. If you were a fly on the wall at that meeting, what would you expect to hear, Abe?
Well, I think that I would expect to hear steam coming out of the ears of Prime Minister Netanyahu.
Yeah.
I think that he's already said, don't start with me about anything about new concessions for the Palestinians, especially while this violence is going on. Stop the violence, and then we can talk. But it's being, the flames are being fanned by the Palestinian leadership, and I don't know what Kerry plans on saying to Netanyahu, and I think he's also supposed to be liaising separately with Hamas. But I think that he may get an earful from Netanyahu about the way he can handle it, the way the State Department can handle it.
Yeah, well, certainly Kerry deserves an earful, as does our dear and glorious dancing queen president. By the way, did we ever tell you that we used the old ABBA's tune, Dancing Queen, sometimes for bump music when we're going to talk about Barack Obama?
No, I didn't know that he had his own theme song.
Oh, yes. After those Jordanian pilots were burned alive by the Islamic State, the King of Jordan came out and was making a big appearance and everything, so we called him the Warrior King. So if they got the Warrior King, we got the Dancing Queen.